but every people has a history. The lands that are now Belarus, however, were part of other national projects until the 20th century. The people contributed to those projects and helped make them unique. But the term Belarus referred to a specific region rather than a nation until late in the 19th century. The early Proto-Belarusian tribes were originally part of a medieval state with the other Eastern Slavs. Then they helped form the much misunderstood Commonwealth, neither Poland nor Lithuania, but a multinational agglomeration of all the lands and peoples and potential peoples that lay in between, before the Russian Empire won control of most of the region in the late 18th century. In the 19th century, Belarusians still thought of themselves as members of the old Commonwealth, or as West Russians, loyal to the Empire and to the Orthodox Church, despite most Belarusians having been Uniate Catholics only a generation before. A specific national movement appeared relatively late, after the revolution in 1905, and was still weak in 1917. The unification of Belarusian lands, first in the 1920s and then during the Second World War, was a project of Soviet power. Belarus is not a nation without a history. The two main English-language accounts, Nicholas Vakar's Belorussia, The Making of a Nation, and Jan Zaprudnik's Belarus, At a Crossroads in History, were written when Belarus was still part of, or just potentially emerging from, the Soviet Union. Both authors wanted to demonstrate that Belarus had a separate history and could one day be independent, strong, and free. But Belarus's history has basically been a series of false starts, though each different beginning has left important legacies. The first part of this book looks at all of these pre-histories, before the modern idea of Belarus began to crystallize around 1900. The second part looks at the rise and possible fall of Aliaksandr Lukashenka, who ironically first won a relatively free election in 1994, before ruling 26 years until 2020. Ironically, too, he molded Belarus in his own image, but Belarus outgrew him. The revolution of 2020 marked another rebirth and the emergence of a new civic nation. The final irony, however, was that in order to survive, Lukashenka looked likely to go in the opposite direction, using Russian support to stay in power. The price could be very high, a hollowing out of the state and its sovereignty. There are 2 new chapters and a conclusion for this paperback edition. Chapter 13 takes the story forward from 2010. Chapter 14 looks at the events of 2020, and a new conclusion discusses whether Lukashenka could survive the protests. In order to emphasize what is distinct about Belarus's history, I've chosen to use Belarusian names and spellings. So I've written Lukashenka rather than Lukashenko. The former is the Belarusian spelling of his name. The latter is the Russian version. I've spelt the city Vitebsk, famous as the birthplace of the artist Marc Chagall, as Vitsipsk, and used words like Litvan that are no doubt unfamiliar to most listeners, but which are essential to understanding the story. Sometimes, however, choices have to be arbitrary. Vilnius, for example, has many names because it is at the center of many national histories. I've chosen to call it Vilna when it was a mainly Slavic city before it became the Lithuanian capital of Vilnius in 1940. It was only really Vilno, the Polish spelling, between the wars, and was never really Vilnia, which is the Belarusian spelling. I've chosen Volodymyr rather than Volodymyr in the main text, but the endnotes keep the original forms. Finally, I've chosen to transliterate the unique Belarusian letter U as W rather than U, which is how it sounds and is hopefully clearer for the general listener. I would like to give warm thanks to all those who've helped in the preparation of this book. To Andrei Dinko, Valer Bulkako, Mila Bertausch, Zyanis Melyanso, and Vitaly Silitsky in Belarus. To Father Nedson, who runs the Belarusian